Our first story, the 22-person standing trial for the murder of Major Maxwell Amohammad appeared in court Monday, wielding Christian literature in a sorrowful manner. They have been before the court since June on the charges of conspiracy to murder and murder after the soldier was lynched in the Central Region town of Dentroboase. Police prosecutors Monday amended the charge sheet to have the names of all 22 persons placed on one charge sheet. There is more in this report by Joseph Akabley.
With their Christian literature, the accused persons were led into the courtroom. At the previous hearing, they had sung hymns as they waited their turn before the magistrate. Police prosecutors requested that the charge sheet be amended to add 3 suspects to the 19 already before the court. This brings the number to 22 persons standing trial on the charges of conspiracy to commit murder and murder. The request was granted by the court with October 10 fixed as the next court date.
Stay with the court. Husband of actress Valentina Ibaka, popularly known as Afriyie, has pleaded not guilty to 5 charges brought against him by state prosecutors over viral footage he filmed of her in bed with another man. Lawrence Abwakwa in the video could be heard accusing Afriyie of cheating and threatening to bathe her with acid. In court on Monday, Mr. Abwakwa pleaded not guilty when the charges of assault, publication of obscene materials, among others, was read to him. JoyNews' Joseph Akabley has the rest of the story.
According to prosecution, computer technician Lawrence Abwakwa on August 29 headed to the residence of the actress armed with a kitchen knife and a bottled substance. He is alleged to have made his way into the house by scaling the wall and using the back door with the assistance of the house help. Chief Inspector Maxwell Amohammad said he then threatened Afriyie with the substance, dragged her out of the house naked till neighbors intervened. He told the court, quote, Afriyie was made unhappy, miserable, humiliated, ridiculed, afraid, jittery, depressed, inadequate, and worthless, unquote. Abwakwa's lawyer Maurice Ampao disagreed with the police narrative. He got the judge to grant his client's bail and told the press they will present the actual facts once they have their turn.
Very interesting charges. Some of them were surprise charges to me. First 2, 3 were surprise charges. That's emotional pain and those kind of things. It was very surprise charges. But I think, say, it is their case. What we are doing is that we have nothing to do. Our own is to sit down and throw doubt. But even this time, we will rather lead evidence beyond reasonable doubt that all the charges are frivolous. And that's exactly what our duty.
Is it your contention that your client didn't spread the video?
At the appropriate time, we will lead evidence to show. Because it is up to them, it's up to the prosecution to lead evidence to show, beyond reasonable doubt, that it's my client who circulated the video. And if you could see, there were evidence to the fact that it was sent to certain personalities, including me, lawyer. So who leaked it? So these are issues that the court will take into consideration, and I think that at appropriate time the court will make.
As it stands, Abwakwa is facing 5 charges: 2 counts of domestic violence, threats of harm, publication of obscene material, and assault. The case will be back in court on October 11.
The Minister of State in charge of Tertiary Education, Professor Chrissie Janka, is urging policymakers and universities at large to immediately table the SHS policy agenda and compute its implications and consequences for universities. He explains this is because government is anticipating a strain on the various tertiary institutions across the country in 2020 as the current free SHS beneficiaries, whose numbers have gone up, get absorbed. Speaking at the UTAG National Congress in Cape Coast, Professor Janka disclosed government's concentration is not only on senior higher schools, but all levels of education. Richard Kwadwo has more in this report.
According to the minister, the new policy of government has seen a stupendous rise in the intake of junior high school graduates into the various senior high schools across the country. This, according to the Minister of State in charge of tertiary education, Professor Chrissie Janka, calls for an early dialogue between the universities and government on the significant repercussions the policy would have on the intake of the universities in 2020 as a result of the implementation of the free senior high school policy.
Whereas annual increases in enrollment have ranged between 2% and 9% in the past, the enrollment with this policy has seen a stupendous rise by 29.5% over last year's fresh enrollment. But this evidently suggests that to be given placement in the SHS has been one thing, but to afford the cost of subsequent enrollment is another thing altogether. Should this enrollment trend continue, that is good news. It is also good news that Ghana's gross enrollment ratio for universities, which measures the proportion of students from the relevant age bracket entering the universities, is likely to see a dramatic rise from the current 15% to levels favored by the National Commission for Tertiary Education of 25% or so. But that also means a disproportionately large number of students would be knocking on the doors of tertiary education institutions in 2020 and beyond. This would have implications for our universities, and planning has to begin far ahead of 2020. It would mean for dialogue on the welfare of university teachers. Indeed, there is a considerable fund of goodwill prevailing in government for education in general and for teachers in particular, and I urge you to ride this momentum to move Ghana forward.
Professor Chrissie Janka believes government's multiple sources of research funding will encourage lecturers to utilize research, particularly in the sciences, technology and innovation, to bridge the gap between the academia and industry and reduce the scourge of unemployment. The new UTAC president, Dr. Opoku assured his administration will follow laid down procedures and other diplomatic paths to ensure an amicable settlement in the standoff at the University of Education, Winneba.
The crisis at the University of Education has been hydra-headed, and like the ghost in Amatedu's play, we have been struggling to make a turn, either to Cape Coast or to Elmina. The chairman, decisions of the court coupled with the diplomatic path being pursued by Vice Chancellor's Ghana will show great light in the midst of the current darkness at the University of Education, Winneba. However, as a matter of urgency, should work diligently to ensure peace and tranquility, because UUW is a national asset that needs to be protected by all of us.
Richard Kwadwo, Joy News, Cape Coast.
We're taking a break on JoyNews Prime, but still ahead, management of Senate backtrack on initial claim that controversial ICT infrastructure said to have cost the trust $72 million is not working. This was after JoyNews investigations found out it is actually working, except for one module.
Let's see how we can renegotiate this. And I've engaged the vendors. We've engaged them. We've sat down.
Are they willing to engage you?
Yes, they are. No, they're open to listening and hearing us say that you were supposed to deliver this. Evidence which I can show you now shows that it is not working. How do we fix it? And how do we fix it at minimal or no cost to us?
Stay tuned. We'll be back with that and more. Now, some communities in the North Gonja district of the Northern Region have called on government to open up the area to enable them move foodstuffs to other parts of the country. The deplorable road network in the area does not only affect agriculture, but also the health of the people, who most often resort to traditional herbal treatment instead of going to the hospital. Here's correspondent Martina Bugrit's report from Wawato, Pansingpa, the Hari number 1 and 2, among others in the Northern Region.
These communities do not just grow cereals such as maize, sorghum among others, but they also grow plantain, cassava and banana, which are rare in the region. Even though they do not use fertilizer because the land is so rich and fertile, they are able to have a bumper harvest, but these produce go to waste because there are no access roads to move this produce to other parts of the country. A member of the community, Ajara Dramani, lamented about the bad roads. She said they are normally cut off from the rest of the world most of the rainy season.
I am a businesswoman who crosses the river to the other community to sell my goods, but anytime it rains, the bridge floods and I am unable to cross, which means my products will get rotten, and that affects my income, so I'm unable to take care of my kids.
Another community member, Chinchanko Williams, said because of the poor road network, pregnant women in the area are unable to travel to other communities to access health care.
If the road is very nice, if the road is nice, we are not getting motorbikes small, so that we can. I'm at the we are organizing people to be carrying people to the nearest clinics. It's true. It's true. I mean, just today, our person from my daughter is highly pregnant, and because of the road network, they prefer going to local midwives. They prefer going to local midwives instead of the German one.
Abubakar Fuseni also said the wooden bridge has claimed so many lives. People fall into the river and no one is there to rescue them. He said they are also Ghanaians and should have a fair share of the national cake.
We are all Ghanaians, but it seems they have forgotten of us. We all vote, and so we deserve our share of the national cake. This road is terrible. Many people have fallen into this stream and died.
Elsewhere, constantly battered by tidal waves, residents of the Alban Beach community in the Shaman district of the Western Region now say they are willing to be relocated. The decision comes after years of continuous flooding of homes and destruction to property. The fisher folk tell JoyNews' Adelaide Arthur they've finally come to their wits' end.
When the first settler from the Volta region arrived at the Western Region's Alban Beach in the 1900s, the ocean was said to be more than 100 meters from the closest structure. But all that's changed now. The invasion of homes by the sea happens almost always, destroying property and threatening lives while at it. Most of the residents, such as this woman, have had to adopt some interesting measures to protect their property.
The sand wall we have built prevents seawater from entering the house. We are so devastated by the impact of the tidal waves. We have no idea what to do now because we have nowhere else to go. This is the second building we have put up after the first one was destroyed by the sea.
Community leader Noble Kindogbache has lived all his life here, right from infancy. Although his hometown is Tregui in the Keta district of the Volta region, he tells me he considers Alban Beach home. And this is why he and other community elders are determined to reopen negotiations for a land to enable them resettle.
The former Omahin of Shama Traditional Council allocated some land for us without the consent of the landowners. When he passed on, the land was taken back by the owners of the land. As at now, tomorrow there will be a meeting between the community and the owners of the land, so to negotiate what we will have to do before the land is released to us. We are willing to relocate, but we will be comfortable there, come here, work, go back in the night to sleep, have a sound sleep, and then the following day we come here to do our work. We want support from the government and NGOs that will help us put down some affordable houses for us. Even if it is possible for us to pay back, we are ready to.
Researchers at the Center for Coastal Management and the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences at the University of Cape Coast have been studying this community where more than 3,000 people call home. The researchers say Anglong Beach, like several other coastal communities, is highly exposed and sensitive to sea level rise, but it has a very low adaptive capacity, making it vulnerable to the severe impact of climate change. The experts recommend that the fisher folk must be relocated as a matter of urgency.
The community is under attack from both the river and from the sea. We were here only just last April this year, and well, the sandbar was nowhere near what it is now. A lot of it has washed away. There used to be a shed under which we sat to do some work. It is not there anymore. We see that a lot of the coconut trees have fallen, and the edge of the shore is now close to the village, and very soon they may have to relocate.
The Anglong Beach community may be struggling with the effect of sea level rise, but it has its specs too. It boasts of an estuary where the Pra River enters the sea, and unlike neighboring Shamal community, you don't find a sandy beach littered with human excreta.
Second Deputy Speaker of Parliament Alban Kingsford is breaking his silence on the procurement of the defective ambulance saga. He said he never did anything wrong in the signing of the document for the procurement of the ambulances and that his hands are clean. Minister of Health Kwadwo Menu last 2 weeks led journalists to the naval base where the 30 ambulances had been abandoned. The 30 were the first of 200 procured by the government of Ghana through Big C Trading LLC in a contract signed on December 19, 2012. According to the health minister, even though it has been established the 30 ambulances supplied by Big C Limited were not fit for purpose, an amount of 2.4 million euros had been disbursed from the consolidated fund to pay for the ambulances. Interacting with journalists in Alban, who was the health minister when the ambulances were procured, said it is a calculated attempt to taint his hard-earned reputation.
Second Deputy Speaker of Parliament Alban Kingsford said he has never hidden his intention, which he described as clear as daylight, of aspiring to be President of Ghana. He told journalists in Wa that he started nursing the dream right from his Tom Brown school days at Wa Secondary School in the early 70s. He is of the view that he is best placed to lead the opposition National Democratic Congress NDC than any of the people also intending to put themselves forward for the party's flag bearer in the 2020 election.
Together with the NDC, we will take the decision as to who will lead us in 2020. But I stand tall among those who have come out so far. And there's none of them, those who have come out so far, who doesn't admire my leadership, because I've led all of them in politics. All of them, those who have come out now. And the current president, my good friend Nana, is aware that from 1997 to 2000, the committee he actually showed his mettle was the Committee on Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. And I was the chair, and he was my ranking. And so if my ranking is president today, who can say the chairman is not qualified to be president?
The Nadolo Keleo member of parliament, who celebrated his 60th birthday and 25 years as a member of Ghana's legislature yesterday, said his intention was to be in politics for only 8 years. That plan was, however, scuttled. He was persuaded severally by former President John Evans Atta Mills, another big source in government, and the then opposition MPP.
And so when I was compelled to come back again, it was really a very painful decision for me. My family wept, my sisters wept, my wife wept to get me back. They disagreed seriously. It was a painful decision. I lost so many good friends because of that decision. And yet, at the end of the day, what the senior people saw that others did not see came to pass. We lost the 2016 election. And now in the House, I am the center, whether it's from majority or minority.
Wading into the issue of the defective ambulances saga, Alban denied any knowledge of wrongdoing on the procurement of the 30 ambulances, saying it is a calculated attempt to smear debt at him.
Is there anything wrong with the agreement assigned? That is the issue they'll be raising. If there's something wrong with that agreement assigned, then you can hold me responsible for assigned, even though the lawyers and other things have gone through it. It is my signature which is there. But the issue they are raising is not on the agreement assigned. The issue they are raising is on implementation. Is that not the issue? Did they say any clause in the agreement is bad? As you see, so when you raise the issue that it was procured during the time of Honorable Babin, the people are like, as if something wrong was done by Honorable Babin. There was nothing wrong done by Honorable Babin.
Reporting for JoyNews, Rafik Salam. Wah.
Hello, good evening to you, and thanks for joining me on Business. Now, the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Addison, has attributed the increase in the public debt to the cedi's marginal depreciation. Latest numbers from the Central Bank showed the debt stock went up by almost 1.4 billion cedis to almost 139 billion cedis ending June this year.
Total expenditures, including arrears clearance, was 14.3% of GDP, below the budget estimate of 16%. Financing of the deficit, equivalent to 4% of GDP, was mostly from domestic sources. Total public debt stood at 138.6 billion, that is 68.6% of GDP as at the end of June, from 137.3 billion, that is 68% of GDP at the end of May 2017. Of the total, domestic debt remained unchanged at 63.9 billion, while external debt was 74.6 billion. The marginal increase in the debt stock in cedi terms was due to exchange rate effects. Global developments, coupled with continued improvement in the macro fundamentals, have impacted favorably on the country's external position. In the year to August 2017, the trade account showed that export earnings increased significantly by approximately 3 billion from last year on the back of increased production volumes in gold, cocoa, and crude oil. The recovery in exports, combined with an estimated 1 billion decline in imports, resulted in a trade surplus of 2.5% of GDP against a trade deficit of 4.3% recorded last year. These favorable developments would help build buffers against any unanticipated shocks. In the first half of 2017, provisional estimates of the balance of payments reflected significant improvements. The trade surplus translated into a favorable current account deficit of 109 million in the first half, compared with a deficit of 1.2 billion in the same period of 2016.
Meanwhile, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has kept its policy rate unchanged. The Central Bank held the rate at 21%. According to the bank Governor, Dr. Addison, the decision was influenced by threats to economic growth and stability.
This implies that the output gap may narrow, but at a much slower pace. Economic activity continues to improve, supported by higher oil production volumes, positive sentiments from businesses and consumers, improvement in electricity supply, uptick in private sector credit, and a number of government policies initiated to boost agriculture and manufacturing activities. All these point to positive growth prospects in the medium term. The fiscal consolidation process is broadly on course. Although expenditures remain within targets, the pace of spending picked up in June and July. The continued revenue underperformance could, however, pose some challenges to fiscal outlook. Headline and core inflation picked up in August, although inflation expectations declined. The committee noted that the uptick in core inflation, an indication of emerging pressures, would require further monitoring. Since August 2017, there have been upward adjustments in ex-pump petroleum prices, which are likely to transmit through prices in the coming months and pose some risks to the inflation outlook. These notwithstanding, the latest forecast show that the medium-term inflation target is achievable in 2018. This forecast is contingent on continued fiscal consolidation and exchange rate stability. The monetary policy stance has eased in line with declining inflation and underlying inflation pressures since the beginning of the year. At this MPC round, however, the committee decided it was time to pause the easing cycle in view of the emerging risks to the inflation outlook, while remaining vigilant and committed to respond and take the necessary policy actions should these initial signs of underlying pressures persist. Consequently, the committee decided to maintain the monetary policy rate at 21%. Thank you.
Now, away from that, petroleum consultant Dr Hugh Appiah has outlined some key benefits that the ITLOS ruling will bring to the economy. He said the apprehensions surrounding the exploitation of petroleum resources as a result of the maritime dispute between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire will now be a thing of the past. He was sharing these thoughts in an interview with Joy Business on the impact of the ITLOS.
One, there is certainty for us in terms of the maritime boundary and where that line should be. There was the debate between both sides on, one plotting a different line and us also coming to say, well, we have this agreement in there which, you need to respect. But with the court ruling, it really means for us that now we know where that line is, clearly should be defined. And that also then means, or leads to my second point, which then means that for the current offshore oil and gas blocks that we're exploring for, we get to keep all of those blocks. We do not lose any of them. And then number three, it also then means that going forward, we're likely to solidify our upstream investment position. And so a lot of the international oil companies coming into the country now would not be feeling jittery on where the border should be, should they make a discovery. And so it means then that with the ongoing exploration effort in that part of, the boundary, we should see more renewed investments coming in there. Again, remember that 2 years ago when the court made the provisional measures, they said that Tullow could not drill any new wells on 10. And so with this, it means that they can now resume drilling and then resume exploring for more oil and gas resources in that country. So all in all, it's quite good for the country.
Now, Tullow Oil says it expects some turnaround in its fortunes following the favorable ruling by the UN International Tribunal ITLOS. The decision by the German-based ITLOS now allows Tullow to go ahead with new drilling activities on the 10 oil field. Work on fresh wells was stalled because of an interim ruling by ITLOS to stop all activities until the final determination of the case. Last Saturday, the special chamber threw most of Ivory Coast's arguments away and made some modifications to the Ghana's maritime boundary. There's more in this report.
According to Tullow, the projected improved fortunes will be based on them hitting their expected production target of 80,000 barrels of crude from the 10 oil fields and a positive investment reaction following the ruling, which would impact on earnings. Charles Darko is the managing director of Tullow.
Basically, the ruling has come out today. The ruling leaves the line as determined by the chamber not affecting the 10 fields, and therefore we can see our way clear to continue with our operations. Obviously, we'll be in touch with the Ghana government in relation to the next major activities that we'll take up. We do have what it takes to go on the field. We are on the field today with our operations, but I mean, in any business, any different aspects of the activities require different consents and permits. And what we're saying is that the next step which we are going forward for, we will make sure we have all the necessary consents and permits of the government. And that essentially is a drilling exercise in respect of additional wells. So, for instance, EPA would have to be involved in that, things like that.
Tullow Oil is now planning to start fresh drillings on the country's second biggest oil field in the Twiniboa Enyira Ntom field by December this year. This would increase the total crude production from the country's oil fields by more than 30,000 barrels, a development that would help daily crude production reach 200,000 from next year.
And that's it for business. Thank you very much for your attention. My name is Emmanuel Apuaji. Have a good evening.
Privately owned senior high schools in the Volta region are having a hard time filling their classrooms following the implementation of the government's free SHS program. Dreading the impact of the policy on the operations, the Association of the Conference of Heads of Private Second Cycle Schools, CHOPS, unsuccessfully tried to get government to place some of the beneficiaries in their schools. The move, the private schools say, has left them with empty Form 1 classrooms and are appealing to government to rethink the policy so they don't completely lose out. Fred Kwame Asari's report.
Form 1 classrooms at Sunrise Senior High School, one of the leading private schools in the Volta region, were empty when JoyNews visited. Though the school has up to standard facilities and saw more than 2/3 of the Owusu candidates obtaining distinctions since its establishment in 2005, parents and guardians appear to have completely snubbed Sunrise in favor of schools where their wards can benefit from free SHS. Management of the school said this had led to a drastic reduction in enrollment, with implications for them going into the future unless government heeds to their calls for some sort of intervention.
We want government to rope private high schools onto the free SHS policy in this way. They don't have to send students to us. No. They don't need to give the schools money, either through the National Scholarship Board or through a voucher system or some system that can be designed.
Wallace Senior High School, also in Ho and equipped with the requisite infrastructure for quality education, had a similar story. 6 students had reported, though the school admitted about 100 students same period last year. Here again, some classrooms were locked during our visit. Rodalyn Marty, a first-year student, told JoyNews her parents opted for Sunrise for her even though she secured admission into a public school where she wouldn't have had to pay fees.
My mom said because of the free education, maybe they will not teach us well to understand.
The administrator of Wallace Senior High School, Ephraim Wallace, says private schools at this rate would have to lay off workers.
In the event where the numbers we anticipated, we are not able to get it, probably that may happen.
What may happen?
The entrenchment of staff are likely to happen.
A retired educationist, Armstrong Boho, is of the view that a private second cycle school with good facilities is better placed to give his child quality education compared to a public second cycle school under the free SHS policy.
The free education, those of us who are actually experienced, we saw that even though it's free, but it's not free. There are a lot of implications in it. That's the reason why some of us choose to bring our wards or children to private school.
The national chapter of the Conference of Heads of Private Sector Schools, meanwhile, says it will continue to trumpet its demand for private second cycle schools to be covered by the free SHS policy, though government through the Ministry of Education had rejected their demands.
Residents of Agogo and sympathizers from elsewhere defied an early Sunday downpour to attend a memorial service to mark 9 years of the passing of former Finance Minister Kwadwo. Amid tears and wailing, relatives visited the mausoleum where the remains of the late Member of Parliament for Asante Achimno has been interred. Antwi has more.
Once that first tear broke, the rest followed in an unbroken stream to remember a man who was loved by many for his humility. For family members and mourners who came in their numbers in remembrance of a man they say served his constituents, country and continent with dignity, though 9 years have already passed since his death, the atmosphere and the mood reflect a recent occurrence. A man who became Member of Parliament for the area after the death of Mr. Baredu, Kwadwo, was at a memorial service. He wants upcoming politicians to emulate his late predecessor for his humility, selflessness, and incorruptible values.
Such is the life of the late Honorable Kwadwo. His life as a political man, his life as an individual, his life as a family man, his life as an indigene of Agogo made an impact to people who live with him. And you can't live without celebrating such a man. Myself, getting into the political landscape was something that I dreamt from him. I remember in 2005 when he came to Adum FM. That time I was a worker at Adum FM, and he came to project the 2006 budget. And it was there that I realized that this man has got something in him that we shouldn't let go. He lived a life that always had an impact on somebody that he meets. You can never meet him and you won't tap something from him. So me as a young politician, people who want to make politics their lifestyle, the man stood for something which we can't ignore. His humility, his selflessness, his mentality towards anti-corruption. He lived a life that you can't say that we should ignore.
Then came the moment for merrymaking. After all, life goes on, as the saying goes. From Agogo in the Asante Achim North District of the Ashanti region, Antwi reporting for Joy News.
My name is Ujala. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good night.